Hello and welcome everyone to Financing Philadelphia's Future with Councilmember Derek Green. So excited to be with you today. This is a live Q&A about creating Philadelphia's public bank. Today we're going to have a kind of an extended update. A little bit of excitement has happened in the last month. Thanks for joining us. I'm your moderator, Vanessa Lowe. I co-chair the Economic Dignity Team for Power. I also host Vanessa's Money Hour on G-Town Radio. So definitely get ready to participate. We will be taking questions from anybody who has any. So please set your screen for speaker view using the icon in the top right of your screen. Enter the questions in the chat, letting us know which section of the city you're from. For example, Joan Jones from West Mount Airy. If you want to join the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition email list, enter your email in the chat. All right, we know how this is a very quick half hour. It goes so quickly. So I'm going to turn it right over to Councilmember Derek Green just to do a quick intro, and then we'll get into some of the big questions.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's always a pleasure to be with you. You left out from your title that you're a local media celebrity, having been on the cover of the Chestnut Hill Local in the past couple of weeks. But it's a pleasure to be with you as always. And I think, we think about on this topic, we've been meeting regularly for months on this Tuesday of the month. We've made some progress in spite of all the challenges and all the difficulties we've had. The Philadelphia Public Finance Authority became law without the mayor's signature. And so that just recently happened. So we're now in the process of the next step, and those next steps are, getting the board appointments, both for the corporate board, and that corporate board will then appoint the policy board, and the policy board will then also hire an executive director. In addition, we've got to focus on the financing of this new entity. Now, the mayor gives his budget address actually in 2 days. Now we'll have to make a push for operating dollars out of the general fund to help support the initial operating of the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority. In addition, we're going to have to focus on the capitalization amount for this entity. And so we've been working on these last two issues with the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition, trying to identify what's the appropriate number, both operating dollars and also for capitalization of this new entity. So my goal is to hopefully have that information and that come to a firm number in both of those areas and very shortly. That once the mayor gives his budget address on Thursday, March 31st, our first budget hearing is April 6th. So we do have a little bit of time, but not a lot of time. And we're also going to need to have some engagement to get people to support, as part of the budget process, the initial dollars that we're going to need for operating of the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority.
Okay, great. Let's kind of break this down a little bit, but I want to go back because I noted that you said City Council passed the bill, but you noted that the mayor did not sign it. Is it law? What does that mean?
Yes, so
with that?
What happens is that when a bill is passed in City Council, the mayor has until the next session of council either to sign it or let it become law without his signature. Now, when we inquired to the administration if they were going to sign the bill or let it become law without his signature, we were informed that the mayor has a legislative team separate than some of the people we worked with in the law department on this bill. And so they stated to me and my staff that the administration had not fully had a chance to review the legislation and have a meeting with the mayor in a time period between the bill being passed and it becoming law. So based on some outstanding questions, as they stated, the legislation became law without his signature. I have not heard back from the administration about some of those outstanding questions. However, I did have conversations with the administration on, one, letting them know that this is going to be part of my budget ask as we go through the budget process. Two, we also started to communicate with the city's Office of Information Technology regarding how do we put out an application on the city's website so that people can apply for either the corporate board or the policy board. And as you know, the corporate board under the Pennsylvania Economic Development Finance Law, based on our analysis of that, the mayor has to make appointments to the corporate board and council will give guidance. So we've been looking at past situations where city council have reviewed applications for different boards and commissions. We've looked at the Fairmount Park Commission as one possible model that we could use. But at the same point, we don't want this to be overly burdensome because we want to get this entity up and running as soon as possible. And we'll be focusing on the budget quite a bit. So that's some of the perspective in reference to that appointment. I know the Philadelphia Public Bank Coalition has put together an application and we'll continue to have that conversation with the city's Office of Information Technology, but we may have to push the administration not only for the board appointments, but also giving guidance to the Office of Information Technology to put up the application on the city website so we can provide as much transparency as possible, give people the opportunity to apply, give us the opportunity to kind of review those who do apply and then make recommendations to the administration.
Okay, so going back to the issue of the mayor didn't sign it, it doesn't sound like you see any, this is going forward.
Correct. Now, the fact that the mayor did not sign it, I mean, that does create some concern, not totally, but some concern in reference to, as we move forward in the budget process, getting the support of the administration to fund this new entity. So that's why, as I said earlier, we're going to have to go back to taking a lobbying perspective with other members of council as we go through the budget process to include the dollars that we need for the initial operations of this entity. Now, we based the operations numbers off of two new entities. One, the Philadelphia Accelerator Fund, which is a affiliate, the Philadelphia Housing and Development Corporation, as well as the Philadelphia Green Capital Corporation, which is an affiliate of the Philadelphia Energy Authority. And both Greg Heller from the Accelerator Fund and Mary Rose Matitas from Philadelphia Green Capital Corporation have been on our show in the past talking about those new entities. So when you think about a $5.2 billion budget, and we're looking for anywhere from $2 to $3 million out of that budget for the initial operations of the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority, that's not a lot of money. Plus you add into the fact that we did receive the American Rescue Plan dollars last year, which was $1.4 billion. Now, a lot of those dollars have been allocated for our budget deficit that we had as of last year of $450 million. Also, the new money we put into public safety to get dollars to the grassroots community-based organizations that are trying to address crime and public safety in our city to provide us anti-violence type of reforms in our city as well. So I just want to give that context of the dollars, but we are going to need at some point, I would say, an advocacy push from those from the coalition, all the coalition partners to get both the administration and fellow members of council to support funding for this new entity.
Dates you put out for essentially the budget process are pretty soon though. So should people be calling the mayor? How should people be advocating for this?
Well, it can be done a couple different ways. Some groups are already doing, what we say, emails to members of council saying we need you to support their issue or initiative. We also will have public testimony days in city council. As of right now, the public testimony day is Tuesday, May 24th at 1:30. Goes from 1:30 to 4 p.m. Now, our budget schedule is subject to change, but as of right now, public testimony is Tuesday, May 24th at 1:30 to 4:30, 1:30 to 4 o'clock p.m., excuse me. So that's an opportunity for people to testify in support of the things we're trying to see in the budget to support the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority.
Great. And I remember last year when we were talking about the budget process, there's a page that people can go and see everything that's been proposed, right? Where is that page? Is it?
Now, generally on the city website, and that's not up as of yet because the mayor's address is tomorrow. but typically if you go to philadelphia.gov, there should be a link to see information about the city budget and who's testifying, who should have on there the testimony and other budget documents. So that way people who are interested in getting a sense of the budget process, they can see that, as well as the budget hearings, which if people are interested in just watching budget hearings, you can watch that through phlcouncil.com/watch. And then you can see that not only through the city council website, but you can also go to Xfinity channel 64 or FiOS channels 40 and 41.
Got it. I'm seeing a couple of questions come into the chat, Peter. You want to give us one?
There's a question that's come in from Dan Hoffman, who asks, in terms of true investment from the city via the taking of city deposits or the making of pension fund investments, is this something the authority can do, or is this a reason that we need to move expeditiously to form some kind of bank?
Well, the authority cannot take deposits. That was one of the things that we learned in our conversation with the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. So the entity itself cannot take deposits. And the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities did state in our various conversations with them that they will be helpful to working with us to actually create a subsequent entity, which would be a public bank. In addition, since the passage of the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority, I've learned in other jurisdictions like Virginia, they have an entity called the Virginia Community Capital, where in a similar structure to what we have, they have a nonprofit that is considered a federal holding company of another entity, which is actual bank in Virginia. So when I look at a parallel idea in here in Pennsylvania, having the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority and having an affiliate of it being a public bank, very comparable to what's happening in Virginia. And that was allowable through the Federal Reserve as a holding company. So that's something that we're looking at, where the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority could be be considered a federal holding company of a public bank in a similar capacity as the Virginia Community Capital entity, a nonprofit entity, was a federal holding company of a Virginia public bank.
I know that one of the things that both the coalition and you feel like is important is for the bank to become a CDFI. So it sounds like we need to wait until the bank is established to pursue that. What is a CDFI and why is that so important?
Well, working and having those conversations both with the our outside counsel Holland and I, as we were structuring the municipal authority, we're following the Economic Development Finance Law, and that's provide a path of having the appointment of the mayor for the corporate board. But then we wanted to have a separation, because under the Community Development Financial Institution qualifying language, you cannot demonstrate supervision and control from the public sector. So we were looking to have the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority as a CDFI. We could also see in the future having the public bank itself be a CDFI as well as a possibility. But we focused on the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority to be under the Economic Development Finance Law as a municipal authority and as a community development financial institution, because then it can receive deposits from other banks who need CRA credit. So that's another funding source for the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority beyond just the capitalization needs that we have, and we can look to the city for that. So that was one of the reasons why we were looking to have the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority to also be a CDFI, so it could receive deposits from institutions that needed CRA credit.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Peter Winslow, let me go back to you. I think I saw a couple of the questions.
Thanks, Vanessa. Can we move the discussion a little bit more detail about the process that's going to be followed to have the mayor appoint the members of the board of directors? I understand that this is going to take a while, and there's a couple of steps that you have in mind.
Yeah, so one of the things, as I was saying with Vanessa earlier, we've already reached out to the city's Office of Information Technology. I know that members of the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition who've drafted an application. The goal would be to have a application up on the city website so people could apply. And then once that time period is closed, an opportunity to review those applications. Remember, under the legislation, there are certain qualities and characteristics that you need to meet in order to be on the corporate or policy board, as well as having a reference from an organization that's in that space. And then from there, having a chance to review those applications, work through a process that we will also like to make transparent and public of how we hear from those applicants, and we're kind of working through what's happened in the past. That's why I mentioned the Fairmount Park Commission as a means of trying to provide the opportunity to hear from those candidates that are interested in being on the board, and then having a way to get that information and then recommendations to the mayor coming from city council. So we're kind of working through that process, looking at what's been done in different areas. We can do a hearing process, but that also takes additional steps because then you've got to introduce a resolution, schedule a hearing, which more likely would be my committee, but it just takes a longer process. So trying to find a way to provide the most transparency, but also at the same time, not overly creating a process that's going to cause more time challenges. So kind of working through those ideas as well.
Yeah, I saw a couple of pieces that went out, including the application for the new Police Advisory Commission, I think is the language.
Citizens Police Oversight Commission, correct.
Citizens Police Oversight Commission, yeah. And I love the profile. It was a very diverse profile in the fact that, like, a domestic violence survivor and somebody who had been wrongly convicted and things like that. So yeah, I think we're hoping for the same type of diverse sort of real life experience that could really speak to serve.
Yeah, and that's detailed in the legislation. People with different type of backgrounds and experiences, but also because we have done appointments by way of council, by way of the committee as a whole. But that also takes time because the committee as a whole is all the members of the city council. So we're trying to find ways, and that's why I made reference to the Fairmount Park Commission, where it's the process, from my recollection, included both the mayor and city council, because that's part of this process as required by the Economic Development Finance Law. So just looking at all of those different characteristics of this process to make it as transparent and deliberative as possible without causing undue delay.
Right. So let's be clear that right now we're working on the city is working on the application for what is called the Board of Directors. And that is the group that gets appointed by the mayor.
Right. And just to remind people, there's two interlocking boards. You have the corporate board, because under the state law, under the Economic Development Finance Law, that's got to come from the mayor. And although that was the analysis of the law department, we provide language in the bill that said that these appointments needs to meet certain characteristics and backgrounds and responsibilities based on the environment, racial justice, and those issues that are in the legislation. And having the mayor make appointments from people that meet those characteristics as dictated in the legislation. That entity is the corporate board. The corporate board would then appoint a policy board, and under the Community Development Financial Institution language for the U.S. Treasury, the city cannot demonstrate supervision and control, and so that's why that policy board would be then be appointed by the corporate board, but the policy board would also have to meet those same type of characteristics and guidelines that we talked about for the corporate board. That policy board would then also hire an executive director. It's the policy board that would do the reviews of the products and analysis a step removed from the corporate board. We also included in the language of the bill the ethics board, So the city's independent board of ethics would have oversight regarding both the policy board and the corporate board, and then a staff hired by the policy board, like the executive director or any other staff members. Because we wanted to make sure that the ethics board, as an independent entity, had oversight over both of those boards as well.
Okay. So, and all of this can happen, both of these boards, even though we're doing right now the first corporate board, but then we're going to move to that next board, which is the policy board. And then there's also going to be a staff person, an executive director, I believe, right?
Right, hired by the policy board, correct.
Hired by the policy board. Okay.
Mhm.
So all of that is going to happen, and we expect that the Philadelphia Financing Authority, not the bank, will be up and operational. What do you envision some of those initial activities of the authority will be as we work our way towards the bank?
So some of the initial activities, once they get up and running and hiring staff, is providing some of the products that we've talked about on this call in the past. Providing letters of credit, guarantees, credit enhancement that can help Black and brown businesses grow. Also providing similar products for untraditional bank customers like cooperatives who are looking to grow. And also you look at developers in the affordable housing space that may not have a strong credit profile. Is really helping those businesses or organizations and those three entities get better access to lending, because we've now created this type of product that makes them more bankable for a community develop, a fellow community development finance institution or some other type of financial institution. So that's the initial concept. And then as the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority is able to grow, it then can create a affiliate entity that would be a public bank, similar to what I discussed with the Virginia Community Capital structure.
So I'm glad you brought up affordable housing because I think there's some legislation, I think it's still being drafted, legislation around, I think they're calling it land justice. And so the idea is the nonprofit developers who are doing, like great work, really trying to build affordable housing, they're having trouble getting access to the land or plots because the sort of for-profit developers are sort of swooping in so quickly. So I think they're looking at a way to essentially give a little bit of more advantage to the nonprofit developers so that we can have a more affordable.
Yeah, that I've been part, as you can see, my green shirt over my shoulder at the Philadelphia Coalition for Philadelphia Association of Affordable Communities. I'm getting my words tied up, but they've been looking at community land trust for some time. The legislation that I did regarding the Housing Trust Fund to provide additional dollars in the Housing Trust Fund by dedicating half of 1% from our general fund budget every year that was voted upon by the voters in the city of Philadelphia to the Housing Trust Fund. So looking at community land trusts as a way of creating ability to capture and keep land in a certain structure that could be used for affordable housing. And also, how do we help to preserve projects coming out of tax credits? I was the board chair of the Center in the Park, and Maple Village is a low-income housing tax credit project that we did some time ago. We were looking to develop another property close to that. That was Germantown YWCA, that we were at one point looking to develop that into what we would have been Maple Village 2. But looking at how we can use dollars from the Housing Trust Fund to help nonprofit developers who want to maintain a project as a low-income housing tax credit project, if they have the resources to buy that project after the tax credits have expired. So those are issues that we're seeing. I've seen community land trusts used in other parts of the country for some time. And it's something I know people are looking at here in Philadelphia as well.
And how do you see the financing authority playing into that mix? Or do you?
Well, I could see it playing into that mix. For example, if a community land trust is up and running, and that's also a nonprofit entity, and say they need to borrow money or need to get some type of financing, more likely than not, a community land trust probably does not have a balance sheet. The only asset it may have is the land. But if they needed to do some type of financing, say they wanted to start do some type of development, I can see the Philadelphia Public Finance Authority being an entity that provides letters of credit or credit enhancements could possibly provide that to that type of land trust, just like other affordable housing developers that traditionally do development, but they may need some assistance because they may not have the assets that a much larger for-profit entity would have. So that's a role that I could see this entity serving, just like as we look at Black and brown businesses or cooperatives as well.
Got it. Yeah, great. Peter, let me take it back to you. Any other questions from your end? We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yes, Derek, can you look into your crystal ball and anticipate what the timetable might be for all these things to happen? I mean, there's so many things that are there, getting some money for operating capital and getting the board of directors set up and all the rest. Do you have an idea of what we can anticipate from a timetable perspective?
As you were saying, timetable, I guess I'm going to date myself a little bit. I was conjuring images of Johnny Carson and Carmack and with the hat and putting the card up to my head, which the fact that I remember that shows that I'm more seasoned than I look at times. But in reference to a timetable, I really would hope that we would have, legislation calls for Operation Start July 1. It's going to be a very tight timetable. I really would like to have those appointments as soon as possible. Hopefully we can get the board appointments both on the corporate and the policy board this summer so they can be up and running. From a budget standpoint, the budget's got to be passed by July 1. So we will be in negotiations and hopefully we can get those dollars. And then for the capitalization, we're finalizing what that number will be. And then we will work on the capitalization as well. So a lot of these are kind of parallel paths, but hopefully as we get to September, we'll at least be in a path of having the appointments and maybe entities already had its first meeting. That would be definitely a goal, if not earlier than that. But once again, we're working with independently elected officials, budgeting process. That's why it's going to be important to let members of council know and administration know why this is an important issue to be funded in our $5.2 billion general fund budget.
Okay. With 2 minutes left, then let's just summarize. It sounds like we want people to be prepared to do advocacy around the budget request. So that's
absolutely.
But we're also spreading the word, soon to be released application for the first board, and then also people who are thinking about maybe being on the policy board. Peter, do you want to, as a member, as a leader of the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition, do you want to take that last minute to say what the coalition's doing around that?
Well, we're working closely. It's going to be a lot of work to convince members of council to support the bank, but we're very encouraged because the bill only had one council member who voted against it. And in the conversations that I've had with various council members, they seem to be very enthusiastic about the prospect for the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority and understand what it really can do to be a game changer for the city. So talking to our council representatives, I think is the next step for people on the coalition.
Okay, thank you. And there we are. We've got 1 more minute. I'll turn it to Councilmember Green to close us out.
Well, as we continue to move forward with these issues, hopefully, as we've come through the pandemic, we were working together collectively before the pandemic. Now, hopefully, we're on the other end of the pandemic and we'll continue to push for these issues and continue to move forward as we try to finance Philly's future.
Congratulations to you and the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition on the success to date. We're excited to see what comes next. Thank you all
Thank
for joining
you.
us. We'll see you next month.
Sounds good.